Okay. So I said last class we went deeper into express.js. Okay. We're able to understand how express.js processes routes requests from one middleware to the other. Okay. And we also was this file from our last class? I doubt. Sorry. Yeah, it is our last class. So we're able to understand how express.js routes requests from one middleware to the other. And we kind of played around with it. Okay. So we also we're able to understand um, creating request parameters and basically these are the main things we did: routing and creating dynamic request parameters. So today we are going to learn how to serve static files from our Express application. Okay, so you know Express.js is actually a web server, understand, and it can serve as a backend for your APIs, and also it can also host your front end as well. Front end in the sense that you can actually build your full stack app. I mean, you can write some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in some files. We call them those are static files, okay? And you can now host those static files on your Express server so that when someone visits your application, you understand? Let's say www.gita.com, your Express.js app will be the one sending those static files to the user, and then the user will be able to see your website, you understand, on their web page, in their from their browser. So today we are going to learn how to serve static files, and to do that is actually we are going to be making use of. Okay. Um, Give me a minute. Okay. So this is our index.js. Okay, I think that's what we used in the last class. Okay, this is what we used in last class. That's true. Yes. We configured calls, URL encoded and JSON middlewares. Um, yes, now let's start the static file. And to do that, we are going to be configuring the express.static middleware. Okay. And this static middleware, this function now that I just called here, as you can see it, is a middleware, you understand? It's going to like return a middleware, which this app.use will now configure, understand? So, and this express.static is a function that is expecting the folder or your file system where your static files are stored. Okay, so from your root application, so this is, let's say this is our working directory now. If I type pwd, it has printed our current working directory, you understand? That is this express static folder. You can call it a folder, but we call it directory, you understand, on the Linux environment. So from here, when I type ls, or you can also be, you also see these things too from VS Code. Let me open VS Code. I think VS Code is going to drain my battery quicker. We don't have that right now. So okay. So for those of us that prefer using the GUI, so I'm to zoom in, right? Is this enough? Okay, okay. All right. All right. Let me save. Okay. So hovering on this function now, is VS Code is still loading. Anyways, so this public folder now that I specified here now is the name of a folder on our file system where um, express.js will always go to look for the static files, which it is going to return to the user. Understand? And in this public folder, you can see it. In this public folder, we have two different folders, CSS folder and the JS folder. Then we now have our index.html file. We all know how to arrange this one already now. So this index.html file is what gets returned to the user. Then the index.html now goes ahead to import the JavaScript and the CSS files. Okay, so let me open the index.js. So I already wrote some content on it. Okay, and then the JavaScript file, I just added a very simple console.log, okay? And then I added an event listener to our document objects, so that if so that as soon as um, the index.html content loads, then we will now see this thing on our console. Page is ready. We'll see this text in our console. Page is ready. Okay. Then in the CSS, it's just very simple, fancy style. So now let's go ahead and go back to our express index.js. Okay. And also, if you let's say have your static files somewhere else in your file system, at least this is a public folder now. Let's say it is somewhere like um, your home directory, your home folder, or your downloads folder, or your documents folder. Understand? So let's say you have this somewhere else. You can also make use of absolute path. Okay. So what is absolute path? Absolute path is basically, when I typed this thing here, when I typed PWD here, this is the absolute path. So if you know how the file system works, the way files are saved in your system, basically this root, this first slash here now is your root, understand? And then inside this root, you now have the home folder. And then from home, this is now my own home, the electrifier's home, you understand? So inside the electrifier's home, to have a clearer view, okay, I don't want to, but to have a clearer view, inside electrifier home, just see like a folder. You now have the dev folder, then Gidas folder, then bootcamp folder, this express static folder. You understand? So this is the absolute parts of my express static folder. That is this place we are currently working from now. This is our current directory. Understand? This is the absolute parts from the root. That is what they call an absolute part. Understand? So let me move um, public to my. This is just a very simple command. Please don't mind what I'm writing here. And you can ignore it. But I just want to move this the public folder. Understand? You can see the command. The command is just saying um, move move public folder that is here now into document. Understand? So now public is no longer here. On this left hand side, public is no longer here, as you can see. So I've successfully moved public folder. So now I want to now use absolute path. Okay. First off, we need to import the task module. Understand? Someone wants to join. So importing the task module. This one is this one's from pre-installed with your um, this one wants to join. Okay, sorry about the instruction. So path dot join, then so you see all those text is now is not what I don't like. So path dot join is just a simple function. Understand? So this function joins all arguments together and normalize the resulting path. So what does this mean? So let's say I have my slash. Let me copy this out. I think I already taught you guys this when I was teaching you about uh, the FS module, the file system module. So you can basically pass home, okay, electrifier, the I will still show you why I'm writing all of this. Okay, this. Okay, save this and then, or better still, let me run this on our this thing, no this thing, command line. So you know what this is now. When you just type Node on your PC, as long as you have Node.js installed on your computer, from even from your VS Code terminal, okay, it's going to pop up. It's going to pop up. So I've just written out this same code snippet in my file. So when I do this, when I run this command now, it just prints what is it called? It just concatenates everything here. Understand? Every single argument I pass to the path gets join function. So what exactly does it do, and why can't we just write the whole thing like this whole slash ourselves? So there's something called building cross-platform applications. And what does cross-platform here mean? It means that your application should be able to run on different operating systems, yes, and on different environments. Okay, you know that okay, this is a Linux application. This is a Linux computer now, and as a developer, I'm currently working with Linux, but I'm not expecting every single of my users to be using Linux. You understand? So I need to understand that some people will also be using Windows. Understand? Will also be running my code or my application from Windows operating system. And you know that Windows don't write the file system this way, slash home, slash user, electrifier, slash everything. First of all, I think Windows even starts with this C double colon, then this is how Windows now writes it slash. Understand? Then before you can have file writing, say download, and you now see this slash instead of um, forward slash, you will now be seeing backslash in Windows. Understand? So imagine you now write the file system this way, and then someone now runs on the Windows PC. You understand? So do you guys get the analogy? Do you get the analogy of building cross-platform applications? Can I be heard? Hello?
I can hear you.
All
Yeah,
right.
my network is
Thank you.
bad, so I'm not sure I can be stable in class today actually.
Oh, sorry about that. So, so my phone battery is almost. So we should always build cross-platform applications, understand? So you don't want to just add code and path this way, understand? You want to use functions where it will be derived during runtime. So now, Node.js has a special variable called um, this double underscore dir name. Okay. So what is this thing? This is actually a special variable in Node.js. And let me type it here now. You will see that it's not defined. Okay. It's only available in the Node.js runtime. Okay, so let me just create a new script, new file, main.js, and this main.js, I just want to console.log that name, equal to, comma. So running this file now, ls, running this file now, that's basically node main.js. Okay, you see, directory name is equal to this. So this command, this variable name now is a special variable in Node.js. So you cannot redeclare this. Okay, the special variable name where they give you the name of your current working directory. That is, you'll be able to access your current working directory in your Node.js script. Like in this case now, we want to know our current working directory where our Node.js our index.js is, understand? So that when we know the current working directory, we will now concatenate it with this public folder, where our static files are. I think I'll have to bring the public folder back. You remember that I moved it to my download folder. So I'll move it back from, not download, the documents. I'll move it back from there, here. So now it's back. So now, join is going to join the our current working directory with the public folder name. So now we now have the full file to our static files. The full file, the full name to our static files. So save this, and then now can now proceed to run our Express app listening on port 3000. Okay, so node index.js is run. App.use requires a middleware. App.use requires a middleware. So where are we calling app.use and not passing a middleware? App.use here, 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 and here. Okay, this is the problem. We now wrap this. Remember that app.join is just what's it called? Node. Okay, I cannot run it here. Main.js. And also, you should also be free to test out things that seem to confuse you. So just spin up an empty file, write a code snippet in it, and run it. You understand? This is the only way you'd actually be able to grasp certain things. If you cannot write it in a file, you can always come to the Node.js command line by running node. Thank you. So now I want to run this, save, then I now run the main.js like that. Sorry. Okay, so I've actually executed the main.js file and see what's it. So path.join is just this path.join function with these two arguments is just returning the absolute directory name for this public folder. You understand? So it is not a middleware. You cannot like pass it to app.use. App.use is going to definitely throw an error. So you have to pass a middleware, which is the express.static express.static middleware, which is the function that returns a middleware. It will now pass the join inside it. Okay, so let's start at Express app now. Node index.js. Server running on port 3000. So let's test it out. So, um, welcome to my website. Logo. There's no logo. Um, well, I don't have any images. Did I quickly configure one? Anyways, so this is our index.js. I said index.js. Our index.html file rendered by our Express app after visiting root. Okay. But then there's something wrong with this code. If you can observe, no matter the um, path you visit, it's always going to return, welcome to my website. Okay, assuming there's a valid path. Um, let me see. Okay, I configured slash test. A slash test is supposed to return this JSON data. So let me see. This is not supposed to return any JSON. What is wrong with you? Post slash test is expecting a post request. Okay, let me change this to get. Understand? Let me change this to get request. Then restart my server. Okay. So somehow it is kind of working. But the main point is that whenever you want to configure, you want your Express application to return static files, you are not actually going to be making use of um, the app.use. Normally, you want to specify the endpoint, you understand? That whenever someone visits this endpoint, I want you uh, to render that particular static file to them. Understand? That is how it's usually done. You don't want to just configure the middleware. You want to say whenever someone visits this endpoint, okay, new. Whenever someone visits this endpoint, render static file. So look at it now. We've just rendered the static file on this particular endpoint. It could be like an about page, you understand? that you just want your express server to return static contents. Understand? So that is it. Or instead of using app.use, you would usually make use of the request method. Understand? So you don't want to just use the normal app.use for configuring middlewares. You want to specify a request method. So that whenever someone visits this endpoint using the get request method, the static content is returned to them. Please return, restart our server and shift this again. Slash new. I get redirected. Mm, it's not working. Maybe because we didn't configure any controller for it. Okay, oh yeah, that's true. I almost forgot. This doesn't work with request methods. Okay, this doesn't work with request methods. You have to make use of the dot use method. Then normally I only build APIs with express.js. I don't even do anything front end. So, but this is something you should know, Sha. Something you should know. Then especially if you're going to be a full stack developer. Okay. Especially you're going to be a full stack developer. So okay, get it out. Start my server. So I actually changed the endpoint to slash static. So anybody visiting slash static would see everything in this our public folder. Okay, everything in this our public folder. That's the way we arranged it. Everything is our public folder. Anybody visiting slash static would see everything in this public folder. That's the way we arranged it. And how do I confirm this? Opening slash static slash I think this is CSS. This is it slash CSS slash styles.css slash CSS slash styles.css. Okay, so we just have our CSS file rendered on our web browser because We visited one endpoint we configured. Is this understood? Any confusion, please ask your questions now. Please ask your questions if you don't understand how visiting this slash static slash CSS slash styles.js actually renders our CSS file, the one that is on our web server. You can see it on the web browser now. Okay, so I believe it's well understood. Okay. And remember that this static file can actually be um, an image. Okay, it can actually be an image. So let's say we have inside this public folder, we have an image, this thing, images folder. Yeah, and inside this images folder, let me copy one from my main gallery. I copy one here. Images. Don't mind the name, please. So, um, visiting these endpoints now. So I have inside public, I have images, and inside images, I have this name. This very funny name here. Let's view the contents in our web browser. Images slash funny name. Very funny name. Yes. So this is our name now. So you can actually host images on your web server. Images like, let's say, your website icons, your logo, you understand? Website logo that you need to render on the front end, you understand? Those images that the front end needs to host somewhere. You can actually host it on your back end, okay? And then just send the link to the front end dev, and they can just put it in their image tag. So this is the name I just hosted on our web server, and I can now view it on our website. Don't mind the name, please. Okay. You want to ask a question? Please feel free to interrupt me. Okay. So I think that is all for hosting static content on our web server. Um, so next we'll be diving into error handling and REST requests. We'll be diving into error handling and then, sorry, it will be,
Your screen, I can't see your screen. I don't know that.
you can't see it.
Yes.
Sorry, good job. Thank you.
Okay.
So next, let's dive into error handling, express application, and HTTP methods and their purposes. Although we've done the HTTP method and their purposes before, but we'll just be doing something more practical with it. So basically, explaining the whole REST principle. Okay, explaining the whole REST principle. So as a backend developer, there's something called um, REST. Sorry. I think I've lost my connection again. Can you see my screen?
No.
Thank you. Um, um, so why my screen is coming up? So as a backend developer, there's something called REST. okay, in API designs. You must have heard about it before. REST API, REST API, REST API. So basically, um, REST APIs or REST basically stands for representational state transfer, and it is like a kind of like a guideline, you understand, or constraint used in designing APIs um, for our web application. Okay, so they have like rules that you are supposed to follow as a backend developer when designing APIs for your front end dev, either web or mobile developers. Okay, so so and part of those guidelines are like the kind of request method you are supposed to use for certain operations. You understand? For example, when using get method, you are not supposed to have any state effects. Okay? At least when you use the get request method, it is expected that your application is not supposed to change anything in its database, you understand, whether memory or storage. So it's not supposed to change any data, understand, in the database. So when you get request, you know it is just fetching um, data from the database, it's just retrieving data from the database. Then when you use post, you know, okay, post request is expected to have state effects, understand? Sending post requests to a web server can change things. Okay. And then we now have the delete method. We now have the delete method. We now have the delete method. So sending the delete method, you know that your API, any endpoint that's implemented is expecting a delete endpoint is expected to like delete data from the database. You understand? And then we now have the put. The put is meant for updating data. Okay. Same as the patch request method. So it was just implement a very simple uh, REST API. Um, Very simple REST API. So this now we are using index. I typically that's the just have written already. Let me see if I can copy it from. Node.js. Sorry, guys. So this is like the core skills that we need to work. So now let's define our database. Okay. I think this should even be an assignment. If I'll just I'll just bundle it as a starter, as a zip file, and then send to you guys. Give you guys something like a starter code. Okay. Please go to the more important one. Error handling. I'm so sorry, guys. We're just trying to beat them, and you can see my battery percentage up here. Yeah, I'm already running low in battery. So error handling. So as a web developer, as a good backend engineer, you are expected to build a system that is that you are not just expected to build a system that doesn't that is error free. Understand? But as a good backend developer, you're supposed to build a system that expects error to happen. And when this error happens, your system is supposed to handle them appropriately. Understand? So we are all humans. We cannot build a perfect system. Understand? So you're supposed to build something that is expected to fail. Understand? And when it fails, you want your system to um, handle that failure accordingly. Understand? And in our API, in our API, with the way users interact with your application, sometimes they don't interact with the application the way you are expecting it to be, and they just kind of break things all the time. Okay. So in this code snippet here, in this code snippet here, you can see I actually defined a get an endpoint, okay, slash API slash users slash the user ID. Understand? dash user ID, and then this user ID is actually expecting the user ID in the parameter, which we extracted from here, request.params.id. And then in this, after extracting, we kind of like passed that ID. At first, this ID is actually like a string. You can see it here. It's showing string. So express.js is giving us a string, you understand? Then we now convert that string um, an into an integer, pass int. That's what this pass int function does. It converts a string to an integer. Then after we get um, that ID as a number, we call this, we do this small check here, this if statement, to know if the user ID is a number. You understand? So if it is not a number, we are going to um, tell the user, we are going to return a 400 status code and then return this um, response body error, invalid user ID. Then we will now end execution of this function by returning, understand? But if that number is valid, then we will now proceed to the next execution flow, which is basically um, by retrieving that particular user with that ID, understand? Okay, so we did not even define our user database. So let us define one here quickly, which is the, excuse me, users is, so let's just assume this is our database, okay? And let me just use this one they're suggesting for us. So this is our user database. We have 3 users in our database, Alice, Bob, and Charlie. So this is not how you, of course, this is not how you store your data in real world, because this is in production. I said in production, is an in-memory database. And as soon as you, let's say, yes, you had coded some values here, but when some users sign up, you understand, when your application starts running, you are going to append this list. But when you append this list, you are not going to actually be changing your source code. You understand? This is the data structure in JavaScript, and when you append it, it's going to get updated in memory. But use your file like this now, it's not going to get updated. And as soon as you restart your server, you understand, all those data that you saved in memory will be lost. And only this data that you wrote here that is hard coded will be recovered, and that is what your application will use to start. You understand? So it's not good to make use of an in-memory database. Who is just joining? I'm already rounding up. So you're welcome. You guys should just make sure you watch the recording for the class. So we will now then, after this our check here to know if the user ID is valid, then we will now run this check and to find the user with that ID. So this find function now is like just a JavaScript um, um, method, you understand? It's the method that you use to work on arrays. Users here is an array, you can see it. It's an array. Users is an array, and all arrays have this find method. And then the find method is now expecting a callback function. Okay, just all those long, listen. So, and this callback function is basically um, is going to this callback function, yeah, is basically going to be called on every single object in this array. You understand? So it is going to call the callback function by passing this value as an argument, that is this user. Then after it calls this function, after it passes this value and calls the function, you understand, it now checks. So it now runs this check as is here. So we see if the user ID is equal to the one that they sent, that the user sent, the one that the user wants to retrieve. So for every user in our database, understand, this callback function is going to run. So let's say it runs on this first one, Alice. Okay, it's going to check. It calls on Alice and it passes this JSON object, and it now checks if that user, this object dot ID, that is ID1, is equal to user ID, that is the one that the user passes, understand, when they visit the endpoint. If it is equal to that particular user ID, return that user object. So it's just going to return here, and then we proceed. So let's say let's say user ID is now 2, understand. This user ID is 2. So it's going to fail for the first one because ID user.id is not sent to, and once it gets to this point, it's now going to return ID2 then Bob. So after we capture that particular user, then at the same time, after we capture that user, we will now return the user. Cannot be very very small. So we'll be responding to the request with that particular user that was found. Understand? And at the same time, what if they now pass ID 4? And in this our database now, we don't even have an ID of 4. Understand? So we also want to respond accordingly. So uh, if our find request now do not return any user, understand? We want to also tell them, say user no dey 404, okay? JSON. So we return the status code of 404. You know what 404 is? 404 means not found. So once your front end sees 404 like this, if it has like a custom um, design for that 404, it's just going to show that 404 page. Understand? So the error message is going to be user not found because we don't have any design. So if we had the design, we'll just render it to the user, and then they will see that 404. So of course, you also want to return because after sending this response, you don't want this one to get called again. Understand? So this return is very important. As long as you've sent a response to the user at this point, and there are still more execution flow down here, you must return. So that is it. We restart our server now. Node index of JS. Oh, I did not call the main function. Then, okay. Your server even listening at any point. So, run it again. Server running on about 3,000. So where's the endpoint again? Okay. So this is the endpoint here. Slash API slash user slash ID. Resetting this now should show us invalid user ID. And you can see here now, this is the ID that was sent in request param slash IP slash API slash users slash ID. Okay. So this ID now is basically this double colon ID, and of course it is not found here. The moment we change this to 1, always on top. Once we change this to 1, so you see it has returned this Alice is there. Let's change this to 2 to return Bob. Let's change this to 3 to return Charlie. And then once you change it to 4, when you know that there's no 4 here, you should respond accordingly. So this is the first step to error handling, understand, in Node.js. Okay, so you always want your user to know, in this case now, if you had not configured, let's say this 404 here now, whenever the users inputs a user that is user ID that is not found, understand? This is going to probably the response of JSON is going to just return like an undefined object, understand? So it's not cool. It's not cool. You want to give your users good experience. You want to let them know that whatever they are trying to get is not in your application, understand? You always want to give them that good experience. That is the first step to building a good application that handles error accordingly. Okay. Then another step, another step is to have something like a middleware. Okay. Const error handler. And in this middleware that we're about to design now, it is like the regular middlewares that we wrote before. Understand? But this time, the middleware is going to be expecting 4 different parameters instead of 3 that we used before. Instead of 3, it's going to be expecting 4. And the first argument is going to be the error. Okay? So the error that was thrown, the second one will be the request, the third will be the response, and the next will be the next. You can see that autopilot is already trying to like refill these fields for me. Understand? So this error is just a TypeScript error. I just code is showing me. Okay. So in this error stack, let's say once the error comes, so let's say there's an unhandled error in this our code, maybe somewhere, let's throw an error somewhere here. Okay. So let's say they pass in an invalid user. Okay. So let's say the user does something that, let me not say somewhere here, sha. This place where you do the database get request. All of this becomes useless because as soon as it throws error, nothing else is going to run. So the return, the user response, everything, you don't necessarily have to put it again. So let's say now during the database request, that is during this user was fine. So let's say now your database now like throws an error. You understand? Somewhere down the line, it throws an error, and then if I save this file and restart my web server, start our web server, then restart this and reload this page, you're going to see that application will crash and the user will be seeing all these ugly messages here. You understand? And sometimes this kind of errors, this kind of errors now are like usually um, unexpected, you understand? So sometimes you don't necessarily want to uh, handle this error in every single controller. Okay, this is like for every single endpoint now that you define in your application, you will now have to start handling this kind of unexpected errors. You can't catch everything. That is just the truth. You can't catch everything in every single controller. So, but there is now something that we now have access to in express.js. Express.js is expecting us to have an error handler middleware. That is a middleware that is specifically designed to catch this kind of errors. So you remember the execution flow so that I showed you guys the other day. Can I pull it up? I'm not sure, but it's in that slide. So when the request comes in, just request middleware one, then the request goes to the middleware two. You understand? Remember now. Then let's say there's now an error. It's now going to enter the error handler, then response. The user has to get a response. You understand? So because if the user doesn't get a response, the request is just going to continue loading forever. Or you get this ugly message on their screen. So express.js gives us this feature. So we will now configure this error handler. And if you notice too, you also notice the position of this error handler. I mean, I placed it just before this app.listen call down here. So I placed it after, let's say there are actually multiple endpoints here. You understand? You can have multiple endpoints. So you want to make sure that you place this error handler after every single configuration that you've done to your Express application. You understand? Or you added to your Express application. So you want to um, put the error handler down here. You understand? So that if any of these things now, either from any module that you configured yourself, understand, or not, like all of these calls that are imported, to from any of them, sha. So if any of them should throw an error during request, this will catch it and handle it accordingly. Understand? So now we've added the error handler, but we've not like done any implementation yet. Understand? If I save it and restart this function, so we will see that we'll definitely be getting the same our application is going to crash and the user will get this ugly message on the screen. Understand? Just loading. Okay. Yeah, loading. Oh my God, who is this? Sorry guys, please. I'm getting a call. Sorry for the interruption. Like, I don't know number is calling me by this time. And I've been cutting the call, but the person won't stop calling. So let's continue. So you see, our request is just loading. You know why now? Um, that is because the request has actually entered this error handler, you understand? And there's no like response. So it's just like stuck here. After it came all the way down here, then it threw an error over here, this place. So after it threw this error down here, over here, the error now gets sent to the error handler. Okay. And then the error handler now gets called, and then something. There's no implementation. You did not even call next self. You understand? So the request just keeps loading. Although I cancelled it. So now let's implement the error. So if error, although there will always be error. You understand? Or maybe you just say something like, um, if not error, um, just go to the next middleware. There will always be error. Then you now return to this point. You understand? Then after that, you now want to console.log, uh, not console.log. We want to pass the error this thing. We want to pass the error to the error output. Okay. Let's say you have a log file configured for only errors. So console.error will pass it to that error file. They will now want to respond to the user with 400, a familiar um, response code, response.json. If I just say error, um, something went wrong. Something went wrong. You know, you could have sent them this error.message here in this place now, you understand? But sometimes it is not good to show your user what exactly broke in the application because I mean this error was not was this I said that this error was like a database error, you understand? So it was not expected. And you don't want to give out those kind of information for security reasons. Don't forget, for security reasons, I'm assuming that this is a database error. Understand? This is a database error. I know that I was the one that wrote this. So it's not this one. I'm assuming that this was a database error. You understand? I know that I was the one that like threw the error. I'm assuming that this is a database error. So wonderful. How has been understood.
I noticed there's a red line up.
Yeah, this place.
No, up. Like if you
Or
scroll. Okay, I've seen it.
yeah,
I've
it's
seen
just
it.
it's this one. You know that this is a JavaScript file and like VS Code tries to link your code using TypeScript. So you just tell me that implicitly has any. If you are working with TypeScript, this is what you'll be seeing, you understand? But this is not a TypeScript file, so you can always turn this off, you understand? For JavaScript files, you get. So,
Okay.
but although when working with Node.js, you're expected to use TypeScript, you understand? But just for the sake of this class, I've been using JavaScript. Probably never pushed any application with JavaScript on express.js before. You understand? You always want to use TypeScript because it is safer to use and you're able to catch bugs earlier, like this kind of bugs now. So that is it. So with this response that I wrote here now, understand something went wrong. So the user is not going to see the particular database error I was I was thrown here now. This one now will only go to our log file. And once you go to the log file as a developer or whoever checks the log file, you will see this error now, and then you guys will now like fix it ASAP. Understand? Then the user will now get something like something went wrong. Status code of 400. So your Express app, this is one of the things the Express app must must have an error handling middleware. So you can always check out how other people did theirs. Yes, so this is just something very basic, but there's still more sophisticated or more better implementations of error handling with Express.js. Although I was trying to round up because my battery was running low, but now that there's power, I might just show you guys how I would implement a custom error handler. So okay, usually this place where I threw an invalid user ID, understand? This is just a normal regular JavaScript error. This is regular JavaScript error. Understand? I did not import it from anywhere. This is inbuilt in JavaScript. So in 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 Express.js, you can define custom errors. Okay, you can define custom errors. In this case now, let's say an API error is just a regular class. Okay, or let me define it in another file in errors.js. So in this our errors.js, we will now have all our custom errors, like errors that we defined ourselves. Okay, so now here you have different kinds of errors, the not found error, okay, which would extend um, the that error class, you understand, the JavaScript error class. You always want to extend it as long as you are defining a custom error class. You always want to extend this. Okay. Then in the constructor could now expect several things like this message, and then the status code. Okay. Status code will now be 404. So I'm adding a default argument. So in case the developer now doesn't pass a second argument to this constructor, so this 404 now is going to be used. You understand? So I don't know if you guys know how to work with classes, but with calling this super method now is basically going to call the constructor function of this error class. You know what we are inheriting from error, you understand? We are inheriting from this error. So we always want to call the constructor of our base or parent class. So by calling super method, we are basically just going to do that. They will now say this dot maybe um, status code will now be equal to whatever status code that was passed during initialization of this not found error. But in this case, since we have a default, most of the times we always want to work with this. Understand? Save, then class validation error, extends error, okay, constructor, then message, status code, now be 400. 400 means bad request. You understand? 400 status code is bad request. Usually, you return 400 whenever a validation fails. Like, let's say you're expecting an email, you understand, and user now send something like a name, and they did not put that at gmail.com. You understand? So those kind of errors are the kind of reasons that you return 400 status code for. So we call our super method again. That is basically initializing the parent constructor. Okay. Then we now have this dot status code is equal to status code. So you know what this means now? This is basically just representing the instance of this validator error class. This validator error, by the time they've thrown this error now, understand? You see the way, let me show you. You see the way we threw this error now. We use the new keyword, understand? So basically, we're just creating an instance of this error class. And after creating that instance, we will now through the instance of the error class, understand? Okay. So now we've defined our two errors, and now I want to export it so that it can be accessible from other files. Okay. So validator error and not found error. Okay. And from here now, pause. Okay. So now we've successfully imported those two errors that we defined in this our errors file. Okay. And after that, this place now where we did something like what is it called? We did like a validation, you understand? So after we converted that user ID to number, so we now checked if is not a number. So we did something like a validation here. That is what this is. So initially, it was not supposed to return. We're not supposed to return like a status code of 400 and with this error body. Understand? But now I want to throw an error so that the error middleware will catch it. So we'll now throw new validation error. Okay, through new validation error with and this validation error now is expecting two arguments. Just the way we defined it, message and status code. Understand? Message message and status code. That's the way we defined it here. But normally, as we were working with just these errors, understand? As we were working with just these errors, we will not be passing just one um, argument, which is just the message. So, but there's also something I like about VS Code. VS Code, whenever you are confused about um, the function or an identifier, you can just hover on that name. When you hover on it, you basically just see a lot of helpful information about that function, like the type. Understand? You get information of like the type, the number of arguments that function is expecting, um, what it is also returning to. uh These are the things that you, you are helped with when you're working with JS Code. So, which is one of the reasons why I stopped using Vim. I used to use Vim before when life was hard. So, Vim is that ugly one. This one I used to use it. So, it's Vim index.js. Understand? You don't have to be writing inside Notepad with more small features. Sha. So validation error. So let's throw the error with invalid user ID. Then now, for the second argument, status code, we can just leave it this way. You understand? We can just leave it this way. Leaving it this way will mean that this default argument we passed here, this 400, this default argument we passed here is going to get passed for us automatically, and then it's now going to get saved to the object using the this keyword. So we throw validation error and save. Now let's now handle validation error inside our error handler. Okay. So if we don't even give our error name. So there are different ways to identify your error. Let's say
Sorry, your
if
screen
someone trying
is
to speak, that's gone
your
off again.
screen.
Okay. Thank you. I'm rejoining now. Look at the yeah, rejoining now. Yeah, I believe it's off again. So now in this so I'm actually adding another attribute to this validation error, which is this name. So I'm giving it like a name that will get saved. I will be using that name to identify this error whenever it gets through. You understand? So the name is going to be just validation error. You understand? Yeah, same as this, we do the same thing here. This the name is equal to not found error. Understand? So we'll be using this name to identify this error whenever our code throws this error. So we've thrown validation error here. And now let's go and handle it inside the what's it called? Inside the error handler video. So now if error, this error, the first argument dot name, as if it has a dot name. So normally regular errors that will be thrown will not have this name. So this name will be undefined, you understand? It's showing any here because it's not typed. So if it was the regular error like this one now that gets thrown, you understand, it's not going to have a name. So this function will not capture it. So if the name is equal to validation error, I don't know. Um, please, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I need a thumbs up. All right, thank you. Okay. So if the error name is validation error, then we want to return or not return. We want to respond with a familiar response code, you understand? So probably either you say error dot status code. So we already know that this status code, but the fact that this error is a validation error will be 400, right? Or whatever error that was passed down here. Here is it, validation error. You know, this one can just be like 499. Okay, and the 499, it can be anything, sha. So error dot status code, error dot response dot status should not be the error dot status code. Then for the response body, just be like a generic error message, validation error, nothing more. So this is just something. This is just like a very basic implementation. You understand? So you should check. I think I have like an implementation in a public repository, something that can help you to design your own error handling middleware. You understand? So you always need to have it in your arsenal. So not found error. If the error name is not found error, you return error dot status code again. You can just force, since not found is 404, you can just force it here. Understand? And just force 404 here. But please give it this way, not found. Else. So if I see there's only 400, we can just make it 500. Something went wrong. Let them know that it is not their fault, you understand? It is from our own end. 500. So now I'm visiting the endpoint again. Validation error is not going to get through. Something went wrong. Ah, because of the second error that we threw. I want something. That is not a number. This is it now. So this one now, I just passed the normal regular alphabet, understand? Alphabet string. So now we now get the validation error. Okay. So we'll do the same thing for what is it called? The second error type. Not found error. Not found error. Instead of invalid user ID, I say user not found. Keeping up. Over here, we'll now handle it. We've handled it already. We start server. Then we want to see validation error expected. And let's say 55. Error not found. You see? Because this is that it does not exist in our database. So one of the reasons too why you want to implement a custom error handling middleware is because you want your responses to be consistent, you understand? Responses in the sense that whenever an error is thrown, you want to be able to like send back more information about the error, you understand? Like let's say in this validation error now, let's say you want to add something like a body, you understand? You want to add something like a body now, and this body will probably contain information like, let's say you are trying to validate the email field. Let's say they submitted the form. And in the form, the email that they sent is not valid. You want to tell the user which particular field in that form is invalid. You understand? You want to tell them which particular field failed your validation. So that is the reason why you want to have maybe something like this body here now. Okay. And then let's say, and to demonstrate that, just assign body so is that body body, then empty object, say, okay. So over here where we threw this error, okay, let's say validation error. So in this validation error, let me arrange this. So in this body field now, you understand? So I want to pass, let's say, the name of the listener is ID, you understand? Appeal validation. So ID, and then the message will now be, and what is it called? Not a number, something like this now. Not a number because that is why it failed, you understand? So not a number. So with this now, we've now given the user a more friendly error message. So we're starting not a ID. So I want to send this. So I did not return the body, anything in the body. Validation error. Okay. So in this response body now, let's see error this, and then the body will now contain error.body, same as this one. Body will be error.body. Okay. Restart server, then visit page again. So this ID now is not a number, so it should show us. So this is our error now, our error response body. So the error validation error. And in this body, we now have helpful information telling us a particular field, you understand, that field validation ID, not a number. So this way now, our response body, you understand, is always going to be consistent, no matter the kind of error that gets thrown. You understand? So when you are building an API, you want to have consistent um, responses. You understand? You want to have consistent responses because I mean, if you don't make your responses consistent, you and your front end there will be fighting like this all the time. Because today you return something, tomorrow another endpoint is returning another thing, another format. So these things this will make and those files can be unproductive. You understand? So you always want to make sure that you are building a very consistent API. You understand? So this brings us to the end of today's teaching. If you made it this far, congratulations. Let me see how many of you guys have seen the class. Just 5 of you. Just 4 of you. Congrats.
Thank you.
So, do you guys have any question before we call it a night? Although, if you don't have any question now, after watching the videos, you understand, you can always reach out to me. I will always make time, even if it is just 10 minutes. I will hop on a call. Understand? I can definitely make time for that. So, in the absence of any questions, see you all when we see again. So I'll be dropping your assignment in the group chat tomorrow morning. The 2 assignments. Okay? The 2 assignments. So see you all shortly.
Please don't make it that tough.
Don't worry. It's nothing outside the scope of this class. Understand?